So this is just going to be the main game loop. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another definition here. Game loop. Obviously, if you've not done part 1 of the video, make sure you go back and you do part 1 before you do this, or it's not going to work. And just to make sure I've made it clear, none of this will work if you don't have Pygame module installed. I've actually included the link below to those as well. So first things first here, we are going to create a couple of variables, game over and game close. I'm going to set both of these to false. So these are going to be flags which the game will look for to kind of switch between different modes. We want a starting position for our snake, so we're going to give it an X and a Y. So X1 is going to be, we're going to start them, it's going to start a snake in the middle of the screen each time. So that's the width of the screen divided by 2, and the height of the screen for the Y divided by 2 again. So this, oh, I haven't done the capital W. Divided by 2. So the next one here is the amount of each one will change. So the next variable here is going to keep a reference of the amount of pixels it's going to change. Now at the beginning this is going to be set to 0 because every loop these will change depending on if an arrow key has been pressed. So these will just keep a reference as to what key has been pressed and then feed this into the loop which actually allows our snake to move. You'll see what I mean more in a second. So at the beginning they're just going to be set to 0. So now the snake list is literally just an empty list at the beginning, and what it's going to do is as we go through it will fill this up. Every time we eat an apple it will add basically a position into this list to take that piece of the snake's body, because obviously every time we eat an apple the snake's body is going to grow by 1. Well, the snake list is going to keep track of the body, so it's going to keep track of the amount of pixels in the body, so the amount of apples which have been eaten, and it's also going to take track of each pixel's position. So as we actually go through the for loop we actually created in part 1 will use this list to draw every position of the snake's body. And the snake length, we start at 1 because we're just 1 pixel, and we're going to grow as we go. Right, if that sounded confusing, don't worry about it. It will become more clear as I show you actually drawing the snake as well. So we've got actually being able to create a food. So we want X and Y coordinate for the food. I'm just going to quickly write this down, I'll explain in a second. Okay, so all these pieces of code do is they create for us a random X and Y for our piece of food to be actually placed. So we're going to round the numbers up because we don't want any decimal places, and the reason we've divided it by 10 and times it by 10 here is basically this little bit at the end stops a piece of food. Basically, if you have a piece of food which is positioned like here, for example, it'll actually be drawn off screen, so our snake won't be able to get to it. This kind of stops that from happening, so it means that all of the pixels will be drawn actually on the screen. So this just creates the actual positions, but we haven't drawn the food yet, so I'm going to talk about drawing the food in a minute. So while we are not in a game over state, so while we have not game overed, so the first thing we want to do is we want to create the option to play again if we do actually hit a game over. So basically, although it's not game over, when we do hit ourselves or hit the wall, we're going to end up kind of triggering this. I'll explain that more as we actually create it. So while the game close equals true, So if we hit this game close, we're going to fill this display with white. You can change the color there if you want, and then we're going to use the message function we created earlier, and we're going to just display the message. So play again, Y or N, and then we're going to update the display with our new message. So pygame.display .update, and sorry, our message here, we just need to give it a color as well, so red would be fine. So we've used our function that we created. So here, this message function, it takes two arguments, a message, here's our message, and a color, here's our color, and then taking those two arguments, it gives it the font style that we want, and then it actually renders it at the position that we want. Okay, so the font style is this one here, so band shift at 20 font size. So that's actually when we hit a game over. So what happens if we, for when we don't have a game over? So basically, if the game close isn't true and we're not in game over, we're going to be playing the game. So what we want to do is we need to use a little event loop. So for event in Pygame .event .get. So this is a function in Pygame which kind of listens for things that the user is doing. So things which happen on the screen, sort of like moving the mouse, keys being pressed, all that kind of stuff. We can use pygame.event.get to actually get any events which are happening on the keyboard or happening in the window and then do something with them. So one of the things that we want to happen basically, if the user presses Y or N, we want basically in this sense, so basically if the game, while this bit is happening, if they press Y or N, we want the game to either restart or we want the game to actually close. So if the user presses yes at this point, so event So what I've basically said here is if the event you've detected, if the event key you've detected is the key N, so pygame.k is the keyboard, underscore N is the key you're looking for, so N. If you detect N while we're in this game close sort of state, game over is going to equal true and game close equal false. Basically this will close the game for us out. If we've selected Y, which will actually replay the game, we want to just reload the game loop. So we're just calling the game loop function again, and that will reload everything. Now, for everything else that happens in the window, what we want to do, so this bit here is actually another its own event. So for event in pygame.event.get, because now this is actually for everything that happens when the game's running. So one thing that you can do is that you can print the event here. So actually in the shell it will show you what's actually happening. So that's something that you can do. So you can look at all the key presses. It'll even print out when the mouse gets moved and things like that, and when things are being generated. So I'd leave that in there. So I think it's a good teaching tool for you to actually see, but it's not 100% necessary. We want to be able to quit the game when we press the X key, the red X at the top of the screen. So in order to do that, so if event, so Python actually has, or Pygame actually has its own sort of function for this. It's this quit function. So event.type equals quit. So that basically says that if you've clicked on the red X, we can just set game over to true, and that will quit our game for us. And now what we want to do to finish off this part of the tutorial is look for our players' key inputs. So if the event dot type equals Pygame dot key down, and then we're going to look for this specific keys. So if event dot key equals Pygame dot k underscore left, okay, so I'll explain this one before we go any further. So basically, if we turn left, we want the X to go obviously we want our snake to go left. And if you imagine our screen as a grid, and the middle, for this example, just say the middle of the grid is 0, well, going left is going to take you into minus numbers. So to say x1 equals minus snake size, well, the snake size is actually 10. So what I'm saying here is if you've pressed left, x needs to be minus 10. So move minus 10 in this direction. And using the loop, we can go round and round and round. The y isn't changing, but if we've moved the our x, we want to actually go left. I'm going to carry on with the other keys quickly, but you'll basically see that they're all more or less exactly the same. Okay, so let's just test this to make sure it's actually not going to throw any errors at the minute. Yeah, so while game goes, obviously, is equal to, sorry, that should be double equals there, so while game closed, double equals true. Let's just try again to make sure we don't throw any errors. Thrown at the minute. There we go, it's just the key presses that you actually want to record. So we've got left, right, up and down, and they're basically just saying what the X and the Y are changing by each time. This snake size is 10, so I'm basically, depending on whether I press left, right, up, down, I'm just changing the X or the Y by plus or minus 10, depending on what the key is they pressed. So that is part 2 of the tutorial done. Next part is the final part about actually drawing the snake and getting the whole thing actually running.